Hi, this is State Representative Hannah Kane, and I am here joined today with a great panel to talk about the Healthy Incentives Program. This gentleman will be very familiar to all of you, Commissioner of the Department of Agricultural Resources, John Lebeaux, Winton Pitcoff, who is the Executive Director of the Mass Food Systems Collaborative, and my colleague in the legislature, Dan Donahue, who is the 16th Worcester State Representative, Liz Sheehan-Castro, who is the Director of Advocacy at the Worcester County Food Bank, and Mackenzie, who is Executive Director of Central Mass Grown, and many of you may have seen her at the Shrewsbury Farmers Market in your travels. So I'm grateful for all of you being here today. I am guessing that a lot of people who are going to watch the show don't know what the Healthy Incentives Program is. It's something that we all spend a lot of time talking about and is very important. Relatively new here in the Commonwealth, about 2 years old now. But would you start out and maybe tell us a little bit about just a general overview of the program?
Sure. The program was launched almost exactly 2 years ago by the Department of Transitional Assistance, which is the state agency that handles SNAP, which is the federal food stamps program. And they run the program in conjunction with the Department of Agricultural Resources and the Department of Public Health. And what the program does is provides fresh, healthy local foods for SNAP recipients, low-income families who traditionally haven't had access to those kinds of foods. It's integrated with the federal SNAP system, and so anyone who uses the SNAP program has a card, looks just like a credit card, yep. And they can use it at participating farmer vendors at farmers markets, farm stands, CSAs, and mobile markets. And the way it works is they choose the food they want, and when they pay for it with their card, that amount automatically gets added back onto their monthly balance, up to a certain cap depending upon family size, up to $40 a month for small families of 1 to 2 people, all the way up to $80 for families of 6 or more.
That's terrific. And we just had an advocacy day at the State House for the Healthy Incentives Program, and you launched a new video that we all saw. You want to give a little intro to it, and then we're going to play a little clip?
Yeah, the people who are most affected by the program are the farmers who are selling the food, and the customers who are getting better access to and buying the food. And this was a chance to capture some of their voices, hear about how the program has really transformed their farms and their families and contributed back to their communities, and get that message out to a broader audience.
And it's about a 6 or 7 minute long clip, I remember. We're going to show about 2 to 3 minutes of it to give a flavor of it, and then we'll be back afterwards to talk about it.
Over a week's worth of fruits and veggies for the 6 of us. It just makes a big difference. Stretch the dollars more. It is just super helpful.
Recently I hit on hard times. I've been getting food stamps, and I think the HIP program is marvelous. Vegetables really are necessary for that good diet.
The Healthy Incentives Program, or HIP, is a program where people who receive food assistance from the government, also known as SNAP, Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, they can come to the market and buy produce, and any money spent on produce is actually matched. So it's a great program because people who receive food assistance historically don't have equal access to nutritious, fresh, local produce.
I really believed in SNAP, and I had, so many repeat customers. A lot of new people came to visit the market to buy their veggies. People really do appreciate it, and when we thought we were going to be without funding, people were really emotional about it.
My sales since HIP has been in, probably up 500%, maybe 600, I don't know, a crazy amount.
When HIP came along, I saw that there was going to be a lot more market potential for that off-season period. And so that's one of the reasons that I got these storage bins, to be able to store this product that much longer.
We just watched the clip, and I think what is most telling about it is there's really 2 groups of people who tremendously benefit from this program. There's really the folks who now have access to fresh, healthy produce and fruits that perhaps either had no access to before or could not afford before, or both. And there's also the farmers, the local farming community, who have been the direct beneficiaries of the funds that come into the program and go into their farming operations. So Liz, can you talk to us your role at the Worcester County Food Bank? You've seen folks who have directly benefited from this. Tell us a little bit about what the experience has been the last 2 years, what you've seen in terms of people who have been able to participate in the program.
Sure. So I remember the first time that someone came into the food bank looking for food assistance after the HIP program had launched. And when people come into the food bank looking for food assistance, we provide them with food based on their family size. And we also try to provide them with other resources, other food pantries that are in their neighborhood that'll be easier for them to access, as well as information about the SNAP program or other resources. And we were able to tell this woman about the HIP program, and she hadn't heard of it. And she just stood there in our reception area and just started crying. She was like, you mean I'll be able to use SNAP at a farmer's market? And it'll be doubled in value? And we said, yes. She's like, are you sure? And she was just so excited. It was such a wonderful moment to see how much it impacted just how she felt. And so we've heard so many stories like that over the past couple of years as we've worked a lot around the county to just make sure people know about the program, and we hear all the time how amazing it is. We had a woman with us at the HIP Lobby Day recently who told us about how she was able to buy all this fruit for her children that before she just couldn't afford things like strawberries. They felt really out of her price range, and how her kids loved them, and it just made her feel like a better mom to be able to do that. And those are the kind of stories that we've just heard over and over. And then we also hear about, because people are able to get this produce, and it sort of is like, it helps with their broader food budget. They're able to then purchase more food for their families and rely on the food pantries a little bit less. And so that feels really good for folks as well. And so I think overall people just feel so excited about the program. And it's so fun to see people that excited about fruits and vegetables and farmers markets and things like that.
And one of the things we find, Representative Donahue and I go quite often to different venues to hear from people who benefit from this program, and the farming community has benefited tremendously. And I think you hear about it quite a bit in your position as commissioner and also as chair of the Mass Food Policy Council. Will you talk to us a little bit about what you're seeing, and is it really as statewide as most people believe it is, the impact?
This is a very broad-based program. I mean, we have a few places where we'd like to have better representation, but it's throughout the state. As is mentioned, I mean, it's a great benefit, obviously, to the SNAP recipients, but in one of the classic win-win, I don't know how many wins there are here, but certainly it's a win for our farmers. It's brought a whole new customer base in. It's allowed our farmers to expand what they're doing, actually start growing some new crops, sometimes to satisfy certain ethnic communities and what their desires are. But I don't have the statistics. I called Winton before. I said, any statistics, I'm turning over to you, because you know them, and I'll have to kill myself to pull them out of my head. But the uptick of farms participating in SNAP to avail themselves of HIP has been dramatic. You mentioned $9 million. Mass agriculture last agricultural census, $492 million a year. So to add $9 million over a couple of years, that's significant.
Yeah.
Farmers are now actually making new decisions relative to HIP as far as increasing what they're going to grow. Might mean they have to employ more help, have help longer. So it's a great economic engine for agriculture. But also, I think, most of our farmers, I was in the nursery business, but grow food, and they like feeding people, and so there's a human element to introducing often a new buying group to what our Massachusetts farmers have been doing. So it's been fabulous. It's just a wonderful program that's done many, many great things.
And we do talk a lot about it's really a product of 3 different departments. So it's your Department of Agricultural Resources, and then the Department of Transitional Assistance, and also the Department of Public Health. because the health impact is really underlying a lot of this, and the opportunity to have people be able to have access to fresh, healthy food is really important, and it has the health benefits as well as just the opportunity to be eating something which is, fresh and just out of the garden. Mackenzie, you really are a person who sees both sides of it, having been at the Shrewsbury Farmers Market the last few years and certainly at Farmers Market throughout Central Mass. You are where the farmers are and coming to sell their product, and where the folks are coming to purchase it with the incentives. Can you tell us a little bit about what you see and what you hear?
Sure. The farmers are so enthusiastic about this program, and they're enthusiastic about expanding their farming operations to be able to better serve the clients. They're adding more employees, like you mentioned, but they're also extending their season, because they're finding that their clients are coming back to these farmers markets, not just up to September and October, November, December, January. There's demand for the product. If they have a customer, they'll grow food for them because they are passionate about feeding people. And they're passionate about feeding all people. It's not just the people who could afford higher priced food items, but the people who can't. And they're out there every single week doing it, and they're looking for more ways that they can continue to do this, and so they're adding new markets. They're, especially in the urban areas, up in Fitchburg, in fact, they had a market that basically was almost done. But thanks to this program, Growing Places, another nonprofit organization, focused up in North County, completely revitalized that farmers market, and the attendance rates have shot through the roof. And that's added more farmers, it's added more funds, it's all around, the investment is well worth it.
And that's terrific. And we have about 200 farmers participating, I believe. Is that accurate?
About 200, almost 220.
Yeah. And so Dan and I have worked on this together, and we have, even though our districts butt up right against each other, different districts. Certainly Shrewsbury and Westboro are more suburban, you're in a more urban setting, and one of the things that's been great about this program is it has also helped provide access for folks that typically didn't have access in the city areas. For whatever reasons, people think that if you're in a city, you can get to anything at any time, and that's not always the case. And your experience in your district really informs that, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm the southeast side of the city, Worcester, so Vernon Hill, Grafton Hill, and those traditional three-decker neighborhoods weren't built really for cars, and they don't really have the public transportation that people require to get around. So you're talking about at least a mile walk for many of my residents to get to a grocery store, and it's not an easy country mile walk stroll. You might be crossing major intersections, and when the weather and sidewalks aren't plowed, you hear a lot of the complaints about the inability to get around the city, and that means having the ability to get access to healthy and local food.
And I've been to the Worcester Senior Center quite a few times, and they have the indoor farmers market there now, and is it going all year, I believe?
Yes, yeah, it goes. I was just had office hours up there about 2 weeks ago, and they came in, and it's incredible how busy it is. They're almost selling out, and they're inside the lobby at the senior center, and people get transportation to the senior center, and it's usually tends to be elderly populations that are at risk, are low income, and might not have the ability to drive anymore. So their ability to get to the store gets difficult. So having it at the senior center right there, it creates a little sense of community, but they have the access to that food.
And I think that's where I was talking to a farmer at one point that talked about how he had diversified what he grew because of conversations and because of the folks that were coming in and asking for certain things. And it's something he never would have grown this item on his own, but now having a different customer base and really coming in and talking about the things that they were looking for. And he said, oh, I'll try it, I'll see, I'll do a little. And now it is a mainstay crop for him in terms of the rotation of things that he works on, because he understands that there's a customer base for it, and it's actually something that worked well in his fields, which he had not anticipated before, which I think is great. So this program was started in 2017. It was originally, did we have $1.5 million, I think, or $3 million for 3 years?
Yeah, I mean, it's an expensive program to build out. All the back end technology, the staffing, and all of that to get it started was costly. But the original budget for the program had it running for 3 years and anticipated about $400,000 of incentives being spent each year. And in the first 9 months, it was $4 million.
So hence, an effort was needed to advocate for more dollars to come through. And Dan, why don't you talk a little bit about sort of the efforts that were undertaken at the State House initially to really make people aware of why it was important, and then how to get some additional funding for the program.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the line we've used probably between the two of us and many others is that HIP has been a victim of its own success, and it's not necessarily something we say a lot about state programs that are brand new, that just come out. Usually there's little hiccups along the way, not that there wasn't, but the program just has taken off. And as Winton just said, the funding had ran dry a couple times, and so we had to, working with policy experts, with the administration, really look at the supplemental budgets and kind of scrambling together to get reps together to speak to the Ways and Means chairs to really make sure that we're getting the funding we need so that the end user is getting access to food, but also that the farmers are planning out, because you can't just grow a crop of vegetables over the weekend and get them to market. So we need to make sure that we were having some sort of stability in the program. So it's been a challenge over the last couple of years to keep up with the tremendous success. I mean, the numbers of the Fitchburg Farmers Market. You hear about places in Somerville that are just having hundreds and hundreds of more people showing up to their farmers markets. So we want to keep the success going, but we need to make sure that we're funding it correctly.
And I think that's really true. I mean, I give the Department of Transitional Assistance a lot of credit for having mechanisms in place to reach out to the SNAP beneficiaries to say, we have to put a pause on the program because we don't have enough funding, to continue it at the moment. So, naturally there's a lot of people who are upset that it is having a pause, but at least we're able to sort of reach them as much as possible and through the work of advocacy organizations like the food banks. But on the flip side, as you said, it's very difficult for farmers where you have, you've planted crops anticipating that you're going to have someplace to sell them. And now if you don't, you have to figure out, well, what do I do with this? I now have, what was the example that was the other day?
Yeah, we had a farmer from Sudbury talking about how because of demand for daikon radishes, white daikon radishes from Asian communities and markets that he goes to, he previously had grown 2 beds of them, and he expanded that into a couple of acres, and he grew 50,000 pounds of white daikon radishes. And because the program was suspended at the end of February, he sold half the crop, so now he has 25,000 pounds, and he's trying to sell them on the wholesale market, which means he's going to lose money on them because he had counted on being able to sell them at retail prices at farmers markets.
And John, from a farmer's perspective, when does the actual planning mode begin and end for the next year's crop?
Oh, sure. Well, I mean, people have already placed their seed orders, have already made decisions about what certain pieces of ground are going to be used for. Seeds have already been started in greenhouses. I mean, we're well into the season right now. Certainly, with succession planting, there will be some things will rotate through like greens, but some things are long season crops. So yeah, the farmer needs a sense of certainty on what to grow, some expectation of where the market's going to be. As you mentioned, I mean, Department of Transitional Assistance has done, I think, a very thoughtful job when they realize that there's a funding issue of when they think the least bad time to do it is. I can't say the best time, which is in the winter months when generally inventory is down. There's just not as much that could be stored, that could be sold. So from February to May is the current pause period. At one time it was contemplated to be quite a bit longer than that, and they were able to shave that down to get through the fall and all the way into February. But right, farmers have already made decisions about this year and are hedging their bets a little bit, I would think, about what the funding's ultimately going to come out as.
And I think we talked the other day that one of the things that you can actually use the incentives for is to buy seedlings and actually plant your own, tomato plant or something in your own home. And so we're sort of missing the opportunity for that to occur a little bit. But because of the, really, again, as Dan said, the success of the program, we have tried, and I know, Winton, you were very helpful in trying to project out that based on what we've been seeing, what do we think we need for the next fiscal year starting July 1? And that number was arrived at $8.5 million, which was a function of we already know, what we're doing sort of in business. We know that we do have a couple areas in the Commonwealth where we don't have the coverage that we'd like to have, and so that we want to be able to add some farmers and some markets. and then understanding that we're also going to have some growth in the number of people using it because they become more and more aware that it's out there. So the number is 8.5 million. One of the things that occurred at the end of last year was Winton's prodding for a food system caucus in the legislature to get formed. It was part of the Mass Food Local Action Plan of 2015, one of the priorities. And so Winton spoke with Dan and I and another colleague, Paul Schmid, who represents Westport in that area, and then 3 Senate colleagues, Senator Ann Goby and Senator Eric Lesser and Senator Joe Comerford. And together we formed the Food System Caucus, which Winton believes is the first in the nation. I'm just going to run with it. I tell everyone it's Winton says that.
That's what
Google it must be true. But, you know, and the HIP is an important part of that, but there's really 3 legs of the stool that the caucus is focused on. And one is food access and insecurity, another is farmland, another is economic development, all around the food system in Massachusetts. And so we came at it with both budget priorities as we enter into the budget season, but also priority legislation and things. And so we launched in January at the State House. We had a really great response right off the bat. We had a great first day, and your Assistant Commissioner, Randall, came. And we had a number of offices, I think, that joined right after that. And then we've steadily grown it. So we're at 74 members right now out of a 200-member body, about 2 months in, which we're really pleased about. It's bipartisan, bicameral, and the effort is to really both focus on legislative priorities where we think the additional advocacy can help push things along, and to make sure at times when we're discussing budget priorities that we have informed members of the caucus who can help us advocate for why it's important. As I mentioned earlier, we had the Advocacy Day at the State House last week. We had, all of you were there, and you had many people go to all the offices of the legislators and talk about why HIP was important. And I think you got a really good response. I know Mackenzie also on Ag Day gave information out on the actual caucus to all the legislators, and we've gotten some additional emails and phone calls based on that, which is helpful. But Dan, you want to talk a little bit about sort of you know, where we're at as a caucus and what we envision the future to be like for ourselves?
Absolutely. Well, first I just want to thank you and your office and your staff, Jess, for just really spearheading the physical, getting rooms booked, getting people on, keeping track of everything. You've been fantastic with your leadership to making that all work. And you know, it's been great because we talk about HIP, we talk about certain particular programs, but you know, we have over 6,000 bills filed at the State House for this session. We're going to have probably 2,000 budget amendments, and the more we looked at it last session, working with Winton and other advocacy groups, is that, well, how do we focus on food as a system as a whole, so we're not like kind of working in silos and instead working together, educating each other together. So we're getting together, we're meeting with different groups, different policy groups, with the administration around how can we both educate ourselves on how to be more effective at legislating or advocating for funding for a variety of different programs, or how can we come together and kind of use our, I believe it's 74 members, pushing 75 members.
Yeah,
which
we have 75th targeted.
Which is out of a 200-person legislature, it's one of the largest caucuses that's there.
I think it is the largest caucus.
It might very well be the largest right now, and so that really speaks, I mean, to, you know, one of the great things about food is that it's universal, and no matter what your geography is, whether you're from a rural district that has farming happening actively, or an urban district like mine that's the end user of that, you know, food affects us all and affects the overall economic development and health of the Commonwealth in the long term. So there's a lot of interest in that. I think, you know, making sure that we're tracking those legislations, those policy goals together. I think we're going to be able to be more effective as a legislature in addressing the concerns that we hear across the state.
And I think too, you know, one thing that you're obviously very aware of, we're one of the most densely populated states in the country, and so protecting our farmland is really important as well. It's really the fabric of the community that's out there. It's a very important piece of it, and so I think that, you know, the farmers have always had, you know, the Farm Bureau and some other traditional advocacy efforts that they've done. But I think this opportunity here to sort of marry together what's important to farmers and farming and keeping our farmlands with the ability to really address the food access and insecurity piece, along with the economic development piece, because when you can tell us the statistics, how much of an impact the food system is in Massachusetts in terms of jobs and economic impact.
So about 1 in 10 workers in the state work in the food system. So
Yeah.
it's close to 450,000 employees. And it makes up about 4.5% of the state's gross product. So economic development, the economic impact of the food system is pretty tremendous.
And again, having advocacy partners is really, really important. And so we recognize that there's a tremendous advocacy effort coming into the State House, and what we hope to do through the caucus is to also really funnel it back out into our colleagues and provide a voice inside to help sort of magnify the work that's being done on the outside. And the good news is that we, I think, have great working relationships between the House and the Senate and the administration and the different departments. And I think that we're looking to sort of leverage the ability to all work together even more closely on some of these issues, which are hugely impactful. Mackenzie or Liz, I'd love to leave it with you with maybe a story, something quick. We've got 45 seconds of the impact of HIP so people can remember it.
So, I mean, the stories that the people tell themselves about the impact that it's had from the client perspective is always amazing. I've had a woman tell me that she was able to go off of like all her diabetes and blood pressure medication.
Yeah.
Had a man talk to us about eating a salad with more than just iceberg lettuce in it for the first time in years. So those are the things that really stick with me that are impactful, and you hear that from just across the spectrum of young and old, and so it's just amazing. It's just amazing.
And I do think that's a great point. We think a lot about families. People who are senior citizens in our communities have been really impacted, limited income, higher cost in terms of healthcare, and this has been a really important opportunity for them too to have access to food that they haven't been able to have for a period of time. So I appreciate all of you being here. I hope that everyone today learned a little bit more about the Healthy Incentives Program. I'm happy that you were able to join us, and I look forward to seeing you next time on Conversations with Hannah.